Shalom. So today we're going to talk about Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 23. But we're not going to get into what the passage means. We're going to deal with the key points, which is talking about the Sabbath and the new moons, right? This is not about when the Sabbath is or when the new moon is either. So let us read the book of Isaiah 66 and verse 23. It says, "And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord." So it says from one new moon to another, right? So what we're going to look at is the duration or the space of time from one new moon to the next new moon, right? We need to understand the ancient culture of the Hebrews, right? So you have the day of your new moon. It says from one new moon to the next new moon. Now, what is the duration or the period of time from here to the next new moon? One of the things a lot of Hebrew teachers do is that they confuse new moon and Sabbath to say it is the same thing, right? But this passage is going to also let us know that they definitely are not the same, because from one new moon to the next new moon, it is more than 7 days. From one Sabbath to the next is only a period of 7 days. So in between two Sabbaths, there are 6 work days. In between a new moon and another new moon, there are way more than 6 work days. Matter of fact, there are even 4 Sabbaths in that space. So how is it that the new moon is the same as the Sabbath? From one new moon, you have at least 4 weeks, and the biblical week is 6 work days and a rest day. That is a biblical week. It's not just 7 days, it is 6 work days and a rest day. So that means in 1 month, you have 4 biblical weeks. So even if there was a 30th day here, guess what? That would not be 1 week. You cannot count this day here and then count your new moon day and 5 more days and say that's a week. Because a week, a biblical week, is 6 work days. Matter of fact, let's get that in the book of Deuteronomy. Let us go to Exodus chapter 20 and verse 11. It says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day." So 6 days of work and a rest day. That is a biblical week. If you have the 30th day here, that's a work day. But then what would follow it? A new moon day. Do you work on new moon day? No. So you can account this day, then the new moon of the following month, then 5 work days of that same new month, and say you have a week. There are 7 days, and then there is the 7th day. So this is one of the things that we as Hebrews is hard to understand. We are hard to perceive the understanding of, because we cannot step outside of what we learned in this culture about calendar. This is the same thing when the children of Israel were leaving Egypt. It was so hard for them to perceive the life outside of Egypt. All they wanted to do was do what? Go back. This is what we're doing spiritually. We don't want to step outside of January, February, March, April, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We don't want to step outside of that. It is so bad to the point that what we do now is we use Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we're still trying to use the moon for the new moon. So you see the confusion this creates? new moon and new month is the same thing. So if you're going by January, February, March, guess what? The 1st of January, the 1st of February, the 1st of March, all of those would be your new moon day. So how further down you're gonna go that okay, the new moon is gonna be the 15th of the month. If you're going by January, February as your month, the 1st of that month is your new moon day. But the problem with this culture is that they love to divide. What the Most High put together, they want to divide. The Most High said the moon and the month is the same thing. This culture said no, separate. One of the things the Most High warned us most about is when we go into the land, do not do after the abominations of the nations. And the very thing he warned us not to do is the one thing we keep doing the most. Is following the customs and traditions of the people of the lands where we dwell. So the month for the Most High is divided into weeks. The week ending with a Sabbath, usually. In most cases, it ends with a Sabbath. So when you have a month where there are 29 days in it, it's going to end on a Sabbath. If there are 30 days, it's not going to end on the Sabbath. So it's not always a week ending with the Sabbath. Right? So this is something we need to understand. We need to understand how the elements work. In Genesis 1 and 14, he told us that these would be used for seasons, days, nights, weeks, months, years, all of that. What was he talking about? He's talking about a light that you can see, that you can say, okay, this is the beginning of such and such. This is the beginning of such and such. Each time you see these lights, when you say, okay, January, this is the beginning of January, what is it that you're looking at? The only thing you are looking at is an ideology, is a belief, because there is no reality to say, okay, this is January. For example, you can say this is a marker, this is a stone. What can you say to say this is January? What can you point at to say this is January? The only thing that's behind that is your imagination. You cannot go outside and show anybody anything and say that is January. That is the first month. And this is the same thing for what they call a bib. But I'm going to do a separate video for that. Right? So one new moon to the next, you have at least 4 biblical weeks. One Sabbath is here, 6 work days, and then there's another Sabbath. So let's get it. New moon to new moon equals how many days? That's 4 weeks. So at least 28 or 29 days. One Sabbath to the next Sabbath is 6 work days. 6 work days. So there should be no confusion between the Sabbath and the new moon. Now, another thing that makes a big difference between the new moon and the Sabbath would be the book of Numbers, chapter 28, and verse 9. It says, and on the Sabbath day, 2 lambs of the first year without spot, and 2/10 deals of flour for a meat offering mingled with oil, and the drink offering thereof. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath. What is the burnt offering of every Sabbath? 2 lambs, 2/10 flour, right? That's the burnt offering for the Sabbath. It says, verse 11, and in the beginnings of your months, that is the same as the day of the new moon of each month, right? It says, ye shall offer a burnt offering unto the Lord, 2 young bullocks, 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year without spot. So for the new moon, you have 2 bullock, 2 bulls, 7 lambs, 1 ram, and 3/10 flour. So if on your new moons, when you go in the temple, this is what they have: 2 bulls, 7 lambs, 1 ram, 3/10 deal of flour for the meat offering. If you go in the Sabbath for the offerings, you have 2 lambs and 2/10 deal of flour. How can these 2 days be the same? New moon and the Sabbath are not the same thing. The next thing, what comes before a Sabbath? 6 work days, but the day before is a preparation day. So you get that day to prepare food on your Sabbath. That means no cooking for the Sabbath. On the new moon day, are you permitted to cook? Yes. So again, how can it be the same thing if you're permitted to cook on the Sabbath? If you are permitted to cook on new moon day, but it is forbidden on the Sabbath, how can these days be the same? If the Sabbath carries a preparation day before it, new moon day sometimes carry a Sabbath. Sometimes the last day of the old month is a Sabbath, a day that you're not supposed to cook. So how would you prepare your food for your new moon day? New moon and Sabbath are 2 separate things. Once the last day of the month comes, that's the end of that monthly cycle. You cannot merge any day from over here. You can do it with your imagination, but in reality, you cannot go back for a day that was in the last moon and come back and put it with a day that is in this moon. And it's the same, even with the imagination, January, February, March. You cannot go back and take a day out of July and put it in August. You cannot do it. Once July is finished, it is finished. You have to conquer your imagination so you can come to the reality of the scriptures, the reality of existence, not the one created here, because the mind has the power to create its own reality. So I hope this gives some understanding, some form of discernment between Sabbath and the new moon, that they're really not the same thing. The offerings were different. The days before were different. Sabbath carries 6 work days. The new moon doesn't. Shalom.